Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast, brought to you by Marketing What's New. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we're going to talk about building analytics teams. This is in a series that we're doing on advancing analytics, which is pretty timely considering that Google's universal analytics is going to be phased out soon. I believe that marketing teams are going to grow to include having analytics as a core function. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of analytics when people do reports that are only backwards facing. Our guest today, as well as myself, believe that when you have in-house analytics horsepower, you can actually use it for discovery and innovation, and even become an organization that is driven by forward-looking predictive analytics. Our guest is the author of the book Building Analytics Teams, which is published in 2020. He's also got 35 years of experience in the fields of data, advanced analytics, and AI. He is global head of artificial intelligence at EY. He was also an executive partner at Gartner and the global advanced analytics and AI function head at the biopharmaceutical company CSL Behring. He has built startup organizations, reengineered the business units of Fortune 500 firms. He's been a technology leader with expertise, particularly in product innovation and strategy, which is all data-driven. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science from Ferris State University and an MBA in marketing from DePaul University. Let's go hear from John Thompson. John Thompson, welcome to the show, John.
Hey, Glenn, so glad to be with you. I'm so excited to be here talking about analytics and marketing and sales and the whole milieu of how to understand data and analytics.
Yeah, and you know a little bit about that. Let's name the book that you have recently come out with about that.
Sure. The book is called Building Analytics Teams, and I really saw a need for it. I've been doing this for 37 years. I've built a number of analytics teams in 20 different industries, put in 60 different predictive analytic applications in those industries. And I just really didn't see anything in the marketplace that was talking about the team dynamics. You know, intra-team in the analytics team, but also across teams, inter-teams, you know, between their customers, their subject matter experts like in marketing and sales and operations and logistics and the other functional areas.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's a bit apart from, you know, a standard line function like you have in a company. But I think we want to first set the table by giving people a sense of how advanced you're talking, because there may be people listening who have been used to there being a few report gophers in their company.
Yeah,
and
sure.
That's just the people that we go to when, you know, we need a query done on some database. You make a very big distinction between that, and you say that 99% of the time organizations are, you know, doing that and have that in their legacy. You're actually writing a book that addresses the 1% that's forward-looking. And so can you tell me about this big wedge that you're, you know, putting in to define what advanced analytics and AI is?
Absolutely. I've worked on something that I've called the advanced or the analytical maturity model. And what you're talking about is something that's historical and you know, looking in the rear view and trying to understand what has happened. You know, that's data, that's historical reporting, that's business intelligence, dashboarding, those kind of things. And then if you jump over the line that you just talked about and you look forward, you're talking about predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics, simulation, and optimization. So that's generally where I've spent the last 10 years. But I spent the previous 27 doing all the things that you were talking about. So, you know, building dashboards, building databases, building alerting systems, you know, all those different kind of things.
Right. And we need them. But I think what happens if we assume that we can build an analytics function and it's really just there to serve those consumers and help them understand that maybe they hit their sales numbers last month or something, that's not the perch from which we want to try to improve the overall business, right? That puts us at a very low stance, and they're going to be very surprised if you try to act proactive with them, if that's all that they've known you for, right?
That's right. It is very interesting. The Tom Davenport said 2, 3, 5 years ago, whatever it was, data science was the sexiest profession alive. And you do get companies that are as small as, 5, 10, 2 people, whatever, all the way up to the size of Walmart, have to deal with data and information. And you need to have a clear understanding of what you're doing. Many people have been doing dashboarding and reporting and operational reports, and you have to have those. I mean, that's just the way the world works. You need to understand where you are and what you've done. But if you have a true data science team, they're going to want to be doing the advanced analytics and the artificial intelligence-based applications. They're going to want to help you understand, you as a sales professional, you as a marketing professional, understand what's going to happen in the future. How can we predict what are our customers going to do? How can we predict what that price change is going to be? How can we predict what that buy one, get one free is going to do, not only to the entire customer base, but to a store, but to a group of customers, all the way down to an individual consumer? We're there. We can do those things now. But if you're expecting, your data science team to just be there at your beck and call every time you have a question about the direct product profitability of cream cheese in the large box store channel, you're not going to have a very good relationship with your analytics professionals.
Yeah, great point. And that their expertise can go, again, as we've said, outside of, a narrow scope. You talk about the analytics team having a community of practice. It's almost, I pictured like, the center of the donut is the team, and then the outer ring of the donut is that community. And it's important that you give them that latitude. You gave the example about, in one case, a analytics team could be tasked with selecting the site for an individual store. And sure, they can do that. But the better way to do it is to immerse them in what the entire business needs, not just, let's say, the site build team, right? You need to give them access to the supply chain logistics team. You need to give them access to the marketing team, sales numbers. And you said in that case, they will rise to the occasion and tell you what new sites will mean for the entire business and how the entire network can be optimized, not just we now have something in a new postal code.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. We all want to know, what's the optimal location. I'm responsible for opening stores in Dallas or Chicago or Detroit or Toronto or Vancouver or wherever. And I can tell you where to put a pin on the map, but that's a bit of a waste of time of my intellectual horsepower and that of my team. We really should be asking the question, how does the network perform? How is this entire organization working? And you mentioned a number of really interesting internal data sources and operations and teams, but we also need to look at the competitive information. We need to look at the federal government. We need to look at the local data, unemployment, inflation, crime. All those things come into play. And we can put those into the model and we can come back and say, yeah, this store looks great, but there's no traffic. The surrounding area is perfect. You got the right demographics, you got the right income, the right inflation, the right unemployment levels, but the infrastructure is just bad. People can't get to our store, so don't build there.
Yeah, they can just take it in any of those directions. So let's maybe start from just the kernel of how you might equip a team like this. And, we can imagine that we'll get over the long term to things like AI tools. But, starting out really simply, some people get kind of stuck right at the starting gate with asking, should we use proprietary or open source software tools? Should we build a serverless database that's, based on something wide open, or should we buy into this one vendor's promise and go with their system? What's your take on that?
Glenn, that's a great question. And I'm so glad to be talking to your audience about this. You and I are of a certain age. We have a little gray hair.
Sure do.
Temples. And, I've been the CEO of 7 different tech companies. I've been on the other side of the fence selling technology to people. The bottom line is it really depends on your organization, your orientation, and your team. If you're building an analytics team that, like I like to do, that has a mix of very young people right out of college to midterm professionals to some, mature, experienced professionals, you're probably going to lean more towards open source. It's just the way it is. If you look at the attitude across that spectrum of analytics professionals, they're not going to want to use SAS or SPSS or any of those tools. They're just not. They're going to want to use R and Python. Now, if you're talking about databases, hey, I want to put my on-premise Exadata, Oracle Exadata database in our data center, or I want it on Amazon. I honestly don't care. It doesn't matter to me where you put the information. You really want to look at it from a cost perspective, because I have conversations with people all the time. And it's like AWS and Azure and cloud, and that's the way we got to go. And it's like, okay, well, fine, that will work and we can do it. But how long are you going to have this database? Oh, well, probably till the end of time, 15 years, 20 years. Well, then it's going to be much more expensive to put it in AWS rather than.
Yeah, as a total cost. Exactly. You argue that even, and if you take the open source tools, some people make the argument, well, they're free. And you say, yeah, free, like a puppy is free.
Yes, I give my good friend Sean Rogers credit for that quote because, yeah, they're free, but at some point, people are going to want to put these things into production. They're going to want to store them. They're going to want to have version control. They're going to want to have all the things that you expect from a software and technology stack. And that stuff doesn't come with the open source version.
Right. And so you just have to look at it. And I guess where we come to a landing on this is you say, like an ice cream flavor, pick one and try to build your team around that. Don't bring discord right into your team by early on saying that you will try to, be agnostic and let people have their own tools, because they're going to build little silos and then we're going to be fighting for fiefdoms, so you're saying pick a lane, go with it, bring in people who have that same knowledge, and everyone will gel around whatever you have.
Right. In my most recent job, we had a team that was a data science team. And it always worked out this way, that every data scientist had a primary language and a secondary language. So some people preferred R, some people preferred Python. So if you were an R primary, you were a Python secondary. If you were a Python primary, you were an R secondary. And I was fine with that because those tools work in different venues and different areas and different things. So if you step back to the BI tools, that's a little bit more mature area, you've got a broader set of people using it, you want to try to find the best tool for your organization and standardize on it. But running around trying to stomp out everybody that's doing a trial and make sure that they're on the same tool, it's counterproductive. Don't waste your time.
Okay, right. And so that bilingual, way of hacking it, that seems like a nice solution, right? You get the best of both.
Well.
Awesome. Let's talk a bit about the people that we're trying to bring in here, because, you and I have been around enough analysts to say some of them are a breed apart. We may have, and I have personal experience working with people who will not only have a particular zone of excellence, but that may have come in a special way that makes them not have other, let's say, social skills, or they may even identify on an autism spectrum. They certainly will, narrow in on a certain type, and sometimes that's at the detriment of other things that we, and I mean we as, general people in organizations, expect them to have. You encourage us to give everyone a fair chance at doing this kind of analyst job in a way that may not make it past the first screen of jobs in other parts of a company.
That's true. Absolutely. And, what we're looking for is we're looking for competence, and we're looking for interest in the work and ethics and curiosity. I don't really care how people wear their hair or how many tattoos they have or if they shower daily or, that's a nice thing to have, but a lot of times these people are sitting in their homes working, all the time. They're not coming to an office. So I for the most of my career, the multi-decades I've been doing it, I've looked back on it, and I would put money on it that the majority of the people that I have managed were on the spectrum at some level. And now
the challenge,
yeah,
the challenge is they're unconventional, but they also need then to be managed in an unconventional way.
Absolutely right. You need to give people the flexibility to be who they are, to feel safe at work, to be able to bring their best self to work. And if you're constantly picking at them for some kind of, maybe they love to wear clothes from the 70s, or maybe they have certain, way that they don't or don't comb their hair, that picks away at their confidence. That really hurts people. So if you really want the best, then let that stuff go. That's superfluous.
Yeah, and it's recognizing our own communication style. You and I right now are seeing each other and we're speaking synchronously. We may have a perfectly good analyst on our team who never wants to be on camera, and where possible would be more than happy doing async by chat rather than being on a call.
That's right. Yeah, people need time to process. They need time to think. They need time to have a cogent and complete response. And that might not come in this back and forth the way we're doing it. It might come in like you said, in a chat or in a text or, a Slack channel or whatever happens to be comfortable for people.
Within the analytics team as well, you described there being different roles where now we've got to figure out, to use Jim Collins's phrase about the people on the bus and being in the right seats, you talk about artisanal versus factory type work. Right. Can you give me a sense of how, the person leading this team also has to consider that?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great question. The artisanal and factory approaches are ones that I developed over the years, and I think I'm the only person out there talking about it, or maybe one of the only people talking about it. An artisanal data science team is a wonderful thing. You got to hire, carefully and look for collegiality and culture and cooperation and that kind of stuff. And that's where you have someone who is not only a brilliant data scientist, but is also very good at interfacing with managers, subject matter experts from marketing, sales, logistics, someone who's good at talking to executives. At CSL Behring, I got feedback from all the EVPs and C-level executives that when my data scientists showed up, they were so excited to have the conversation because they know it was going to be concise, it was going to be to the point, it was going to be business oriented, and it was going to give them a clear understanding of what the objective was and how to achieve it. Or if it couldn't be achieved, the team was there to tell them, look, this is going to be a failure, don't do it.
Wow. And it's great to have people like that on board when it comes to hiring them. I think a lot of people, particularly those of us who haven't spent our career soaked in doing our own analysis, we struggle to find people, and I think of, let's say, a CMO or a CRO who has to place an analyst on board their team. I'm going to basically answer your question for you. You have an answer for what to look for, what that X factor is. You say that you need to have people who are observers of life, processes, people, and the world in general. They have to look beyond the surface of a process or result or a model. They look at the precursors, the economic, the organizational context, and they look for the elemental causes and effects. So I'm gathering if that's what we're solving for, we may find people who we put in an analytics role who come from a completely different background than what our industry is.
Yes, absolutely. There's at the university.
That's scary, though.
It takes more time to get on the same page, that's for sure. But
right.
The University of Michigan has a class on Coursera called An Intro to Python, taught by a guy named Dr. Chuck. And the design principle for that class was to enable liberal arts majors to understand coding. So we want people who are history majors, English majors, law, pre-med, early women's studies. We want all those people to take a look at analytics and see if it's there for them. One of the people in my network who I love dearly is a guy who was a social worker. And there's nothing wrong with being a social worker. And he had done a lot of his social science work and understanding statistics. But when he did his master's program, he realized he was a math wizard. So, he has an immense amount of empathy and social intelligence and emotional intelligence and a vast understanding of math and data. And he's one of the best analytics professionals I've ever seen.
Yeah, so we have to make sure that we are not biasing towards those who've taken the traditional path and that look like they were an analyst from the age of 12.
Right. Some of the things that we see there that are problematic, Glenn, is that, many of the people that have taken that path, and I've worked with a lot of them, and some are very good, some not so good, is that they tend to be very cut and dry. The math says the answer is 7. Well, what's that mean? Is 7 good? Is 7 bad? What's the context? I'm trying to make an investment decision here. I'm looking for you as the expert to help me understand what decision I should make. I'm happy to make the decision, but I need something more than 7.
Yeah. And if they are so cocksure of the answer, it may take them time to come back to you and say, well, there's a confidence factor around 7,
right.
Or it's 7, but with these qualifiers.
Right. And 7 means this. 7 means we should build 3 centers. Or 2 centers, or 2 stores, or 7 means we shouldn't build any. It depends on the context. So, I've worked really hard with my data science teams over the years to realize that when you're going into those meetings as an artisanal data scientist with the C-level executives or EVPs or SVPs or VPs or whoever, they're looking for you to be a business professional. So when you leave the meeting with us data science nerds and go into that meeting, you're talking their language. You're talking at the level of their conversation, and you're having a conversation in their vernacular. You're not talking about p-tests and t-tests and neural networks and classification and clustering. You're talking about investments. You're talking about the good of the business. You're talking about next quarter's profitability. That's what you're talking about. That's what you get when you have a real artisanal data scientist. Now, let's go back to something that you mentioned a few minutes ago. If you have a factory team, you're not expecting those people to do that. You're having them in stations. They're doing data ingestion, they're doing data integration, they're doing feature engineering, they're doing modeling, and they're having a piece of work come to them, and they're working through that piece of work. That piece of work ends up at the end of it, and you have someone else go out and present that. So the factory work is something where people are just hammering away on repetitive process. The artisanal, you got someone there who's at a higher level of development, higher level of intelligence, higher level of social and emotional intelligence.
Right, and who craves that variability. Just back to the factory for a moment. We're we're recording this in late 2022. There are, let's just call them economic pressures to look at wherever we can not hire people or use consultancies or outside expertise. What's your take on which parts of that factory process we can safely outsource versus which parts you are very convinced we've got to keep in-house?
Absolutely. Consultants are great. They certainly have a role to play. They can do really good work for us. And I tend to think that you would want them to work more on the more repetitive commodity type of work. My view is that if you're doing something truly strategic that's going to make a difference in your business, that is competitive, you should be doing it yourself. You should be learning it and building your models and evolving and growing and having that in-house. So when someone comes to you and says, I want to try to really understand the elasticity, of the price of our certain products in a certain market at a certain time frame, you really need those people to be there and understand it and be able to be conversant in all the contextual elements as well as the factors that you're thinking about.
Yeah, by the time you get an outsider off the ground there, the need for that answer may have come and gone.
Exactly.
We're going to take a quick break because I want us to dig into how we interact with that outside circle, that community of practice, but we'll do that right after a break. I'm taking a moment to talk about the new Google Analytics. In early 2023, the in-person GA Fast Forward workshops will happen in Ottawa, Kingston, Montreal, as well as across upstate New York. You can go now and see registration details or get notified when it's happening in your area. Just go to gafastforward.com, spelled as you'd say it, or GAFast, the number 4, then WARD. Let's get back to the conversation. Okay, John, we're going to swivel now, and we've got to kind of look at this almost as if the analytics team is now the product and their stakeholders are looking at them as that product and how good the product is. You've been in enormous organizations where you've had so many different, polarized areas, and you've been able to see this all, but, try to bird dog this for us and tell us, for those of us who haven't got this function up and running, or we don't quite know how those recipients of our dashboards or of our findings are going to react, let's look ahead a little bit to that, because I think a lot of people maybe have visions of like Dilbert cartoons in their head where, we have the analytics team delivering something and then the rest of the organization just saying, what is this?
Yeah, exactly.
So let's maybe start with how you encourage us to, it's a process. It to me is rather circular. It begins with a request, right? So take me through how the stakeholder is supposed to approach the team and make a request, and what you expect the team to do as that request is coming in.
Absolutely. And I encourage all the executives and subject matter experts and managers out there. I tell them my door, my phone line, my mobile phone, everything is open all the time. You can call me anytime. I may choose not to answer because I may be having dinner with my wife or family or whatever, but you can call me anytime. And the reason that's important is when inspiration hits someone, what I found is the more time they spend rolling an idea around in their head, the worse it gets. What they tend to do is they tend to shave off all the ragged edges. And often the ragged edges is where the innovation is, where you can make a difference in a business process or a product or a price or a marketing mix or a sales approach or whatever it is. So I tell people, as soon as you get the idea, call me. Let's have a conversation. And I'll be kind about it. I may tell you that's a really bad idea. We can't do it for whatever reason. It often comes down to the fact some of these ideas are impractical because we don't have the data. We are data scientists. We're not magicians.
Yep.
So, we can't create things. I mean, we can create some things, but we can't just create things whole cloth. So when people show up, we have an idea, we have a conversation, and then I usually talk to them about, hey, is this something that you just want to know the answer, within 3 to 5 weeks, and we can do it. We'll collect the data, we'll integrate it, we'll model it, we'll come up with an answer and we'll give it to you. And that's a project and we'll be done. Or is this something that you really care about? Is this something that you want to look at over time? It's going to be part of your operations and you want us to build, automated data feeds and models and things that feed into your world on a daily basis. If that's the case, that's a program. And that takes more time and that takes more effort and more investment. And typically what people will do is they'll say, let's start with a project. And we'll do the project,
Right.
We'll give them the information, we'll be successful. And then usually 5 to 7 months later, they'll come back and they'll say, you talked about this thing called a program. Can you tell me more about it? And then we go off and we do the program. So people need to know who you are. They need to know who your team is. They need to know, are you competent? Are you capable? Are you going to deliver on your commitments? Or are you going to embarrass me in front of the organization? Are you going to take me backwards? So once you prove yourself on a project, then you got a little bit more leeway to do more.
Wow. So I agree with you that it's probably helpful that one thing that they can both do, the stakeholder and their analytics counterpart, is start with a project. You call that the tree, if we were to imagine that the program is the forest. Mm-hmm. So something that is, itemized enough that we can both just rally around it and box it.
Yep.
But the empathy of what you've said, right? I mean, the fact that we have to have two individuals, one who knows the business intimately well, the other one who's very cognizant of the data that it's going to take to analyze. These people have to be willing to find a way to talk with each other. There's got to be enough of that. And like you say, close enough and frequent enough conversations that they really get each other.
Yeah. Yeah. When I talk to an executive or a manager or whoever, and I say that we're going to do this project together, one of the first things that I stress, and you've read it in the book, is that, the subject matter expert needs to be dedicated to the project. And that doesn't mean that they're involved every day or whatever, but they do need to have time on their calendar. They do need to have the approval to work on this. And they're probably meeting weekly with the analytics professionals, and they're talking in the language of that subject matter expert, and they're examining the problem to get back to the point of elemental forces so they can actually build it so it makes a difference. Of course, we can build a dashboard that shows you the sales of the product by color and shape and SKU and store and all those other things, but that's just dashboarding and reporting. If we're really going to get into it and predict and possibly prescribe the actions that you should be taking, there's going to be some really detailed conversations about data and analytics and governmental regulations and all those things over the span of weeks and months.
Right. It's freewheeling. And the other piece of it that both sides have to be open about is estimating how long it's going to take to get to the answer. And you point out how hard it is to come up with an estimate early on that you can stick to.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what anecdotes you have for this? We don't live in a simple world.
No. And, we're hopefully taking on things that are hard. We're taking on problems that are challenging. We don't know sometimes how good the data is going to be. We built an application about a year and a half ago now that relied on location data from a number of different apps. There's a number of aggregators in North American market that Foursquare and Civet, Civet, not Civis, but another data provider that take, location data from different apps and they merge it together and they give you an aggregated view of where people are. Well, about a year and a half ago, Apple changed their privacy settings and basically knocked the legs out from underneath that entire industry. We were using a data set that had a signal of about 80%. After that change, it went down to 20%. We had an application that was ready to go, and I had to go back to the C-level executives and just say it won't work. And they were incredulous. They're like, "What are you talking about? It worked a month ago. You showed us these great insights and this wonderful information you were developing." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the raw material changed." It's like if I had a silver mine and I came in one month and I showed you I was pulling out 52% ore, as opposed to rock and rubble. And the next month I ran out. There's nothing I can do. There's no more silver. It's just, and it took them a while to get their head wrapped around it. They came back to me at least 3 times and said, "We want you to release this app." And I'm like, "I can't. I don't believe the results. I'm not confident that you're getting good information." So let it go for about a year. You know how people are. They change their behavior. They start letting themselves get tracked again. We rebuilt the application and now it works. But, for that year and a half where Apple made that change, it completely changed the raw material.
Right. And you point out in particular that granularity is something that a stakeholder who's a linear thinker will get especially, magnetized around.
Yeah.
And we've got to both be willing on both sides to, let what we can do be sufficient. I think that's, the phrase you just said that I think nailed it for me was, it's got to be worth doing. So if it's something that can be done and it's worth doing, then granular data or no granular data will find a way to work towards getting it.
That's right. We're coming up on some really interesting applications now and developments in artificial intelligence around the world of causal AI. I'm writing my 4th book right now and learning a lot about it. And causal AI allows us to take a wide range of existing data sets, observational data sets, experimental data sets, and bring them together through different kind of data treatments so we can do even more than we have been able to do with correlation-based technologies. So the world of AI is just going to get better and better and more interesting over time.
For sure. And we'll come back to that at the end. The part about us finishing the data crunching and coming back to a functional team with answers, there is some delicacy here. You've already talked about how when a data scientist comes in, sometimes there's going to be news that isn't going to be welcome. Other times they're going to be getting wider perhaps than the functional person would want them to. But, what advice do you have for testing for whether or not that stakeholder has the volition to actually adopt the changes that the analyst is going to do? I mean, this whole thing culminates, right? We've done the work, we're building trust, but if we don't keep our eye there on the last yards before the end zone, we may fumble it, and we may find that we present our findings and then nothing happens.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point, Glenn. And, the data scientists have to be an interesting mix of curiosity and patience. We want them to have a sense of urgency to move things forward, but, our subject matter experts are going to have to come along. They're the people that own the business. They're going to have to believe in the information and the insights that we're delivering. We had one situation where we had developed a forecast that was based on neural networks and some really interesting data, and it was much better than any forecast that anyone was using. And we provided it to the business, and 6 months later, they still weren't using it. They were still using their Excel-based forecasts. Luckily for us, a new senior manager, a new executive came in and asked me what we had been doing for the business, and I showed him. And he went to the teams and they said, why are you using this spreadsheet-based forecast when John's team has built you, an automated neural network-based forecast that's within, single-digit percentages of the actuals? Why aren't you using it? And they're like, well, we're not really comfortable. And so, they came back and we said, okay, well, how can we get you comfortable? So we did more training and things like that. And they started using it and they're like, wow, this thing's really easy and it's fast and it's accurate. Why weren't we using it before? And I'm like, don't ask me that question.
That's an example of the upside. You point out the downside, and I guess I'll call out, because you and I both have MBA degrees, so I guess we can, call BS on the prototypical MBAs who will also, probably out of fear of what we're about to tell them, or out of the fact that they don't have enough literacy to understand some of the data concepts, that they will not adopt. They will block our abilities to get these things implemented into production. And you point out quite rightly, don't forget they can also cancel your budget, right? So we do have those people to contend with as well. That may be the patience part you're talking about.
Right.
Maybe some diplomacy.
If you can muster it, yes.
Right. So, but my point is we've got to reckon with them either way.
Yes, absolutely. We have to work with them. There's no doubt about it. And, if they're feeling uneasy or afraid, we're the only people that can make them comfortable anyway, in what the benefit is in moving this forward. And some people are just playing for time, and that works too. I've
or they're working within a 90-day reporting cycle, and that's all they care about is having a nice number at that 90th day.
And we've had other people that, knew they were going to move on in jobs. So, they were just shelving it or holding it off until they got promoted or moved. And then when new people come in, the results are still valid for the most part. So you can go to the new management team and just say, hey, we've done this. And it shows that your market is actually 3 times larger than what you think it is. And when new people come in, they're like, what? Tell me more about that. So you take them through the process.
So use those opportunities.
Yes, you take them through the processes, and those things last for years. Their shelf life is years and years in length. So I've had situations where I've gone back and I've showed it to people and they've not been willing to do anything about it. I put it on the shelf and waited, and sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it's 3, and you bring it back and people look like, wow, this is really timely and we could use this today. So don't feel like it's your last shot.
Right. Right. Have a good filing system and, be ready to pull it back out of the back.
That's right.
When you also point out that we don't necessarily need to get into a confrontational stance with them. We, as analysts, we will often arrive at the conclusion of what the data is telling us before that person in the function does. So sometimes a little bit of it is giving them enough time with our findings so they come to the same conclusion.
That's right. That's right. And I hear it all the time, and I'm so pleased every time it happens that, my part of my job is to help people see the reality of where the business is today, and work with them and coach them and train them and teach them. And then at some part, you start hearing your words come out of their mouth, and it's like, okay, my work here is done. I can go on to somewhere else. So that happens all the time.
And I can say from the other side, I've had conversations with analysts where I'm gobsmacked at the way that they have a certain mode of answering questions that really seems to be out of left field. And the first couple of times it rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And then as I listen to them more and I hear how they see the world, I come around. Or they'll say to me, well, that's not the question to be asking, Glenn. The real question is this. And, well, damn, that wasn't on my notes coming into this meeting.
Yeah.
But we have to be willing to do that.
And we're getting back to some of that personal, approach and some of the spectrum behavior. And, sometimes people say things and it's like, you could have said that a little bit more softly, or you could have said that in a way that was a little bit more collaborative, so.
Sure. Or on the other side, they have said what was right. We just didn't hear it.
That's right.
You spend a piece of the book, and, I'll have to compress it because there's a lot of it. But when we kind of think about this loop that we've been doing, it kind of finishes with a number of things being spun off as applications. So it could be a dashboard, it could be maybe a self-service query tool. But, you point out that your specialized SWAT team is not in the role of doing that production stuff necessarily, and that the functional team needs to be oriented to bringing on their own tool so that they can use it. They're just two different mindsets.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If you have a data science team that's focused around innovation and transforming businesses and giving people, information that can help them, make more money or be more efficient or reduce costs or whatever your focus happens to be, you don't want that team maintaining same set of applications for 3, 4, 5 years. You want them to build those applications in a way that they can be handed off to an operational team or a marketing team or sales or whoever. I mean, my view, and you have kids too, Glenn, is that, if you do something once as an analyst, you have to be ready to do it 100 times or 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times. So what I tell my teams is that, look, you should build this so it can run on its own. And the user interface is acceptable to an end user. So they can run it. So you don't have to. So that's what we tend to try to do, is that if we build a forecast for a sales operations team, we build an interface so a sales operations team can operate it. You don't have to be a data scientist to operate it. You should understand the business. And if you can push go, stop, and display, you should be able to make it work.
Yeah, and you brought it up once already. We're coming back to it now. There is a new wrapper that can be brought into what you build, AI, which may even make what that thing is doing better over time. And you tend to look at AI as having that function in the near term. contrary to what other people say, where it's going to replace whole industries and it's going to, move, whole floors of a building, completely out, render them unemployed. You say AI is really just more additive. It's one of a string of things that we've had that has been moving in this direction.
Yeah, AI is incredibly powerful. I am a big believer in AI's promise and the capability, but I'm a believer in augmented AI, augmented intelligence. It's more systems and people. It's not just systems. We're at a point now where I think we realize humans do some things really, really well. Systems and computers and AI do other things really, really well, and together they're better. So I'm not a believer in the dystopian Terminator future. I just don't think that's happening. But I do believe that we can do better forecasts. We can do a better job in understanding our consumers. We can do a better job of helping our employees. We can do a better job of being good capitalists and making money and doing good at the same time.
Yeah. And while the computers can work on the answers to things that they have been tasked with, we can maybe go spend our time thinking of what the better questions to ask are.
That's right. Computers are not going to give us better questions.
Correct. John, if people want to find the book or find out more about you, where would you send them?
I'm a big believer in connecting with people on LinkedIn. If you're a marketing and analytics and AI person, find me on LinkedIn, John Thompson. I'm happy to connect with you. If you're trying to sell me wealth generation schemes, forget it. I'm not interested. Or Amazon. Amazon's the best place to find my book. The two that are out there, and the third one's coming out in February. It's called Data for All. And then my causality book, Causal AI, will be out in April or May. So look for me on Amazon, John K. Thompson, and you'll find it.
My goodness. Yeah, we're going to have more John in our lives. That's for sure. And you have done a great job of explaining things that some people find rather hard to explain. I found the book was very explanatory and made the subject something that anyone, even the person who is funding an AI and analytics team, but may not ever do what they're doing, it gave them enough information that they can, find budget and give the proper environment in which this function is going to succeed. So I want to thank you for that.
Thanks, Glenn. I really appreciate that. It was my intention to write a book that was very explanatory and easily understood by a broad population. So I love that feedback. Thank you.
Excellent. So thanks to the people listening to this who came right to the end and hopefully got value out of this. And I hope that you got something that you can get insight into your marketing that'll make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.